And this is your part 2 of a freehand sketch. So before I start to do anything on my drawing, I'd like to show you a piece of work that's done last year by a student. The line work is a student work, and I rendered as a class demo with markers. As you can see, just the perspective by itself, it sort of has sufficient level of details, and the furniture are interesting and has, all the details. And the perspective is quite nice, and where it's looking, and it's quite balanced visually. So that's where this project eventually will end up for you as well. So you will do your line work, and then once we get to the marker rendering part, we'll pull out the line work again, and then you will render it. So that's this part of the work. And I'm going to come back to my own line work, and I'm going to work on it again and fix some problems. And if some problems that I consider to be rather not important, then I will not need to fix them. So first of all, I already did some much darker lines, as you can see, because the drawing eventually has a lot of stuff in there, and the perspective gets a little bit obscure. So that's why I add in much darker lines, so the perspective will come back again. So I also fixed the problem as I draw over with much darker line. For example, I did not divide this equally to 3 parts, so I redid that. So I kind of make sure that at least it's much better. And of course, if you look at it very closely, maybe just a little bit, not 100%, but that's good enough for our grades. So so because it's a freehand work, so of course you can try your best, but there's no guarantee that it would be perfect. And I think the perfectionist for this grades is also unrealistic expectation. So we sometimes kind of have to accept that I think maybe there I didn't do a perfect work, but that's okay, because you need to move on and work on, eventually finish the work. And also I would like to demonstrate to you with the same lecture is how to do a 2-point perspective, because the one that I just did is a 1-point perspective. But I will finish this one and move on to a 2-point perspective. So first I'm going to tidy up the messiness by just drawing the bare bone essential lines and ignore all this supporting lines, such as those diagonal lines. So my drawing will be much clearer and easy to understand. So as you draw, there are many techniques you may consider to use. The most essential thing is you have to draw. If it's a horizontal, you really should be horizontal. Okay, if it's a vertical, it really should be vertical. So you need to slow down and not to in any rush. Still my perspective point. Okay, that's pretty good. And try your best, but realizing this is a freehand work, and maybe for many of us the trick is to slow down, so there's no need to be any rush. because if you rush and then you did not do it correctly, you have to do it again, so it's more time consuming in that sense. Okay, and another thing is, if it just happened that we did not do a perfect job, we just have to, sort of accept it as it is. And when you draw horizontal, really try to be horizontal. And as you wish, you can wobble a little bit, balance yourself a little bit. And when you draw vertical, they really should be vertical. And hopefully they meet. And as you can see, every often I stop my line, because for some of the line, for example this long line, is really, stretching my ability to a maximum. I do want to every so often, come back and sort of do a little bit wobbly. But also, if sometimes it's too long for you and you can no longer balance yourself, you may want to stop and then continue. And then you may not even need to fix the middle part, and just leave it as it is. Okay, let's see, here we are. Okay, it looks like it's here. And as you draw those horizontal lines, for example, if you're drawing this line right here, you need to kind of look over those lines, so make sure you are drawing parallel. So when you're drawing this line, you're not only looking at the line you're drawing, you're constantly looking for some kind of a visual reference. These two lines just look a little odd to each other. Okay. So that's enough and a sufficient level of detail for this version 2, because the reason I'm doing version 2 is I want to tidy up and just leave the minimum information in there so that I don't get myself confused. So I'm going to move on to the third part, is adding some furniture or something into this space. But before I do that, I'd like to teach you just the very fundamental knowledge about the drawing of furniture. Let's say I have a table which is round and with some kind of a leg. So the table is sort of looking like this, and with some kind of a leg, and with a base like this. This is a very simple perspective, but in order for it to be pretty correct, we need to understand when you draw any shape, you need to first put them into a box, and then you draw. Okay, everything started with a box, even this shape right here. Okay, so what happened is you will draw diagonal lines, and what happened is, okay, what you're going to do is basically imagine there is a vanishing point. Looks like this, maybe somewhere here. Yeah. So to draw a nice circle, you kind of need to go through those points and draw a nice circle. Because a lot of time what we do is, especially the ellipse. The ellipse is not easy to draw. Many people draw it. For example, this one I just did here. This is kind of wrong because you actually see more on the other side, less here. So this is actually wrong, right? So you actually would see more of this side less of this side right here. So if you actually follow the rule of perspective, and also when you start to draw the middle part, you're not going to do it here because that's not correct. You would have to sort of see where it is. That's pretty much the middle part. And the smaller lines like this can probably just be, rather loose. But the bigger perspective, you kind of need to draw it correctly. So this is the round shape. Let's look at the different shapes, such as maybe for a chair. Okay, let's say my room is roughly like this. I'm just loosely putting something so that you know what I mean. Okay, so a room. So let's say I have a chair somewhere, or some kind of a seating arrangement somewhere here. I probably can figure out how it looks like on the floor. Maybe I want it to be just a little bit. So one thing to avoid is because you have your vanishing point here, you really don't want any of the edge to finish here, because then it's getting really difficult to draw. So that's why I extended just a little bit so that the edge is on either side, or it might even be okay to be on, something to be totally on one of the side, but avoid cutting something, a piece of furniture, line up with your vanishing point. Then it's getting, how are you going to draw the side surface? It's going to be really difficult. So let's say this is the bottom of that piece of furniture, and I kind of know the height of this furniture. I can sort of use whatever line that I already found from my perspective, and then just say, okay, that's sort of the height, okay, and that's the base, and that's sort of the height. Okay, so how do you do it? You are going to draw vertical lines, which then sort of allow you to draw a box. Remember, all of those lines goes into the perspective. So the box is like this. Okay, that's the box. So if it's a seating arrangement, and if that's a box, and then we can start to draw in details. Okay, there's a cushion on top of it, there's a rounded, and there's a leg as well, So when you draw in the leg, let's say the leg is just rounded and some kind of a darker color. So when you draw the leg actually inlined and is correct in terms of the perspective. So if any of the leg goes this long and another goes here, okay, that's not the correct perspective, because everything you sort of want to put into a box and then see how it looks, in relation to this box, which the box normally encompasses this shape, but it's bigger than the shape. Imagine, everything that you have, there's a box, go over it, cover the shape, things like that. So for example, I have a chair. If I have some kind of a bar stool, remember, I always use perspective. Vanishing point, which I have some kind of a bar stool. So what you want to draw is you want to draw in the box situation, and then you can draw in your legs. You can draw in your legs. The stool, and you can then draw in some details, something here. Okay, if you like, you can draw a lot of detail to it, yeah? So then you kind of get a situation like this. it is a little messy. If you like, you can fix it. So maybe let me quickly reach to a piece of paper and then just tidy up. Okay, so if I want to tidy up, it's kind of a cushion. That's kind of a cushion. So that's why I sort of have a little bit round shape. And the neck is like this. There's a side to it, and there's also so once you have whatever roughly in there, now you can start to fix the whole drawing. I may just see a little tiny bit of the other leg, or maybe I really don't see very much of it. So, if you like. So that's pretty much a chair once you finish sketching it. You know, all the details are in there. Okay, so that's just this scenario right there. So we're going to put this one into practice. I'll grab a piece of paper. Okay, and kind of affix the paper to it. So I'm going to roughly, there's a 3 meter here, 2 meter here, so roughly 1 meter here and there. You know, I'm going to start actually I may just start with my sofa instead of drawing the line, because I know the sofa is rather my foreground. So if I draw something in my foreground, then there's a less chance that lines will crossing over each other. So I'm going to, for example, my sofa comes to maybe 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1, 2, 3 meter, which is quite long, maybe only 2 something. Yeah, so this is my 2 meter, this is my 3 meter, as you can see. So my sofa comes out here. Okay, and the sofa is really less than 1 meter, so roughly probably here. So as you know that a lot of things that you kind of, and the sofa is normally lower, the back of the sofa is normally just a little bit lower than a meter, so you kind of know that, you know, and maybe roughly like this, proportional wise, yeah. So then of course the perspective line here. Let's say the sofa comes up to here. Remember, always avoid everything to line up with your vanishing point. And I know it's just a little less than the meter, so this stuff is probably kind of some of the lines don't quite meet that perfect, but that's okay, because this is a sketch. So that's kind of a box situation of the sofa. Of course, I can certainly come back. I will have to come back and twist over and fix the lines. So, okay, so that's the sofa, and in front of the sofa, maybe with this much space, I will have some kind of. So you have to. You may like to think about drawing everything on the floor. And then start to, bring them into the space. And sometimes it's really just how you feel about the space. And how tall the coffee table might be is normally just slightly lower than your sofa seat. So this whole scene is sort of like a box. That's the coffee table, and maybe a little bit of space definition of a carpet of some sort. Okay, so maybe go up to there, and maybe there's some design, paneling here and there. Okay, so the trick is you do have to remember what things are, and you don't want to confuse yourself. Those two surfaces are facing that direction, and this is facing that direction. So you have to make sure what you're drawing is actually making sense and is actually correct. And roughly correct in terms of your space. So I wanted to draw in some kind of TV stand. I know the TV stand is not too much taller than the sofa, so and really it would not come out this much. It's roughly like a half meter right here, so that's probably wrong. Okay, and the height is probably okay. Okay, and okay. Okay, and where should they stop? So that's the corner of my wall, so of course it probably stop before that. So that's a TV stand of some sort. Maybe just draw in some details. I only hatch in stuff when I really could not see the shape, so I hatch something in there so that I can continue to see what I'm drawing. Maybe a panel behind. Okay, so that's still the space. That's still the space. And I do want to, and this might be this really can be some kind of a, bike wall. So if I have lines that you should try to use your perspective point, vanishing point. Okay, so maybe a little bit of thickness. Okay, and maybe a painting behind. So there's 3 meters, and how tall the painting should be, it should not go over up to the ceiling, so it's definitely maybe just a little bit above the eye level to start. And since we have those lines and they're very handy, I can sort of just use them. Maybe that's where the painting is. Okay. And maybe I have some ceiling design, very simple. I'm not going to really design this. I'm just going to kind of draw in some details. So maybe just a small distance from either side. Then I have this line right here is actually represents the job ceiling. So using that point, again using this point right here, okay. So drawing the line and drawing this line as well. Give a little bit of height. that's the drop ceiling. And what else I want to put in here? And of course, window. Window is roughly pretty easy to draw. As I can have my window sill roughly just at the height of my sofa. And where is my middle part? And here is the middle part. And maybe the window kind of go like this. That's just one window. And the next window is going to be like this, and then the third window is going to be like here. Maybe equal distance. As you can see, this is roughly pretty, pretty messy, but maybe a little bit of design over there. So that's this one. Very sketchy. What I will do eventually is to trace it over and draw a nicer version, but this is the beginning of it. Okay, so this is a very beginning sketchy perspective. I'm going to move on. This is a very long lecture. I'm going to move on to do a two-point perspective using the same using the same grades. So to save some time, you should probably do a different grade. Instead of using this one-point perspective grades, you should do a different one, but I'm just going to use the same one and do a little bit of modification. So it's a two-point perspective. I'm still going to use this one as the vanishing point, and this is still my eye level, and this is still one of the corner. And two-point perspective, the second vanishing point is going to be somewhere to that direction, but I would imagine is going to be pretty far. So okay. So where is my 3 meter now? Okay, this line north, that's a mistake. So as you can see, that's my, if it's a one-point perspective, it's right here. So remember this line right here? That goes this direction. And this actually will cut through your two-point perspective. So what happened is this surface right here, as a flat surface, it's just got to rotate a little bit. So basically now it's getting a little bit messy. So I will draw it very dark. And realize that this line is really kind of arbitrary, because you really don't know how far, and you don't want to know where the vanishing point. So you kind of just give a small angle there, so that this looks like a two-point perspective. So basically, I brought this point, this corner point, from here to here. So that's what happened. So the wall sort of just slanted a little bit, and still using my corner from my one-point perspective, which is basically right here. And then, and this is arbitrary. This is really just kind of giving a slight small angle over there. Okay, so now this is my new point. I'm going to draw it. Okay, and the corner line is still the corner line. Actually, this is still the same. This is still the same. Except this vertical line that we used to divide the space, they're no longer correct, at least for this one. And for this one, you can pretty much just use the same. Okay, so maybe you can pretty much just use the same. So maybe this 1 point perspective is still useful. Practice on drawing vertical lines. When you finish drawing them, they are parallel. Okay, okay, so the difference is before, those lines in the space, they are all horizontal. Now they're kind of all angled. They're all angled toward 1 point. So those lines eventually, all of this direction, they're converging. So they're no longer parallel. They should not look parallel. They should look like that they are converging. They should look like this. And your eye level is somewhere in the middle. So they're converging. They're kind of going to 1 point. Okay, so when I start to draw this line, so where do I mean, I'm not drawing something that's totally parallel to this line to begin with, but just a slightly, slightly angled, but don't overdo, because if you overdo and they converge too quickly, they also don't look quite right. They may look a little awkward if they, if they actually converge too quickly. So that's kind of your this line. I may not need to draw anything on the ceiling because I just, the ceiling is less a problem because there are more details down below, so I won't draw the ceiling. And so now I'm going to draw like the same thing. I need to kind of divide this one into equal parts, but they're no longer equal because now we have a perspective. Before, 1 point perspective, we can just find the middle point and divide them, and now they're no longer equal. So they're no longer equal, but you can actually still use those lines that you drew before, and then use them because they're the old line that's already in place for 1 point perspective. Just use them because they kind of also crossing your the back wall. But when they cross at your back wall, they're not equal distance. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1 is bigger than 2, is bigger than 3, is bigger than 4. It's not like before, they were all equal. Before it's 1 equal to 2, equal to 3, equal to 4. So it's just a different scenario. But if you use the same line, they still work. Okay. So then, of course, it is getting a little bit messy, and those vertical lines kind of. I think I may sometimes, if I don't feel I'm doing correct, I will probably just change a little bit, because really this distance, this whole distance right here, that's your arbitrary decision. You can decide that this last line finish here as the 4th meter. But you can also decide that the last line comes to here, because how this is going to converge, that's going to be your decision. It's an arbitrary decision, actually. So, okay, let me just get another piece of paper. A rough one, and finishing up this tutorial with. So my 2 point perspective kind of goes like this, here, and okay, here. So I know this is my 4th meter. Okay, and where is my other 4th meter? That's your decision. Okay, maybe here. If you decided to be here, it actually should have a little bit of convergence. So it should not be equal distances. So this and this cannot be parallel. Yeah. So they're kind of converging just tiny little bit. But where it is your decision. Yeah? And sometimes there are different ways of dividing the space. And for example, with this is kind of a perspective. With this, I'm just fixing my line a little bit because I feel like it's not really at the middle. So with this, what you can do is you can actually use the same technique. Okay, middle point, yeah, and draw some kind of diagonal line, and middle point. Okay, so you can actually divide. Let's say if I decide, so this is what I mentioned before, there are different ways of making your first guess. We started with making a guess here as what is 1 meter, but we can also decide, okay, this is my 4th meter. I have pretty much a lot of items to be included, but nothing beyond the 4th meter. So if that's the case, you can actually decide that's the overall area, and then you can start from there, you can start to, to divide your space. They should pretty much cross each other. And if you like, you can draw another diagonal line, and meeting there, and another diagonal line, and meeting there. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can just connect them. Okay.